Welcome back. China has carried out a live fire drill on the Tibet plateau, deploying one of two brigades it has on the plateau. The exercise involved mobile artillery along with missile forces and some infantry. Let's take a look at the area of the exercise. It was carried out in southwest Tibet, in areas south of the Brahmaputra River, which means it was bordering India. The brigade of about 5,000 men involved in this drill is tasked with the defense of Tibet. The area of exercise is not far from Doklam Plateau in Bhutan. Earlier, there was an exercise involving an armoured brigade, meaning that more than 100 tanks backed by some elements of mechanized infantry and artillery. The implications here are very clear. China is moving rapidly to improve the posture of its forces in Tibet, building their capabilities, ironing out deficiencies and working hard to eliminate the physical difficulties in operating on the Tibet plateau. China's military infrastructure in Tibet is worth looking at. The nearly 2,000-kilometer long Qinghai-Tibet railway line runs from Qinghai province in China to Lhasa in Tibet. It provides all-weather seamless transport for moving Chinese troops and equipment. A network of all-weather highways now runs all along the border with India. Along sections of this highway, China has built logistics bases and underground storage sites for its military. Add to that 14 airfields that can operate a wide range of military aircraft, 8 missile bases, 20 ICBM missiles and 17 radar stations. China clearly is trying to ensure that the high altitude of Tibet does not put it at a disadvantage vis-a-vis India. Today, it may not yet have the capacity to strike deep into India from Tibet, but it is building that capability at an enormous pace. That much is evident. Joining us this evening is Atul Aneja, the Hindu's correspondent in Beijing, someone who knows that country and understands Indian foreign policy at the same time very well. Good evening, Atul. Good to have you on the show. My first question to you, what explains today's live fire drills?
Well, it's a escalating psychological warfare more than anything else, which has been taking place following the standoff in the Doklam Plateau area. If you recall, a few days ago, there was a firing by a tank which was publicized, a new light tank, probably fit for this terrain, which was tested and publicized by the Defense Ministry here. And then this has been followed by these drills which are taking place. Now, it's interesting that these drills have taken place opposite Arunachal. The signal seems to be very clear that in case of a conflict, China is willing to expand the theater and not necessarily confine itself to the Doklam area, where it does have a disadvantage vis-a-vis India because of the terrain and other features. So that is a very clear message. Yet I do see some calibration here, because you see a lot of focus on air defense here, which is probably in response to India's air advantage, which we have. And therefore, seems to be still more defensive oriented, though you did mention that there's mobile artillery involved over here and the use of multi-barrel rockets, which is shown in the CGT, and that is the CCTV clip on these exercises. But nevertheless, I do still think that this is calibrated, or the signaling is very clear that if you guys are, that it's not, we won't do it on your terms, in case there's a conflict, and we are willing to widen it. And Arunachal itself, symbolically, again, is important because this was a theater of the 1962 war, for which we don't have naturally, it does evoke unpleasant memories. So there is a psychological element there again by trying to push these exercises opposite Arunachal.
Atul, sources here in New Delhi say that China in private for the past few weeks has been maintaining that we want to de-escalate and we will do it at a gradual pace. But in public, of course, it keeps sticking to this hawkish posture. So can today's exercise be termed as an attempt by Beijing to just boost the morale of the PLA?
Well, you see, they're moving on two tracks because there is a certain position which the Chinese have taken vis-a-vis their own population, the kind of media hype that has been created after this. It's very difficult to move away from this narrative. But at the same time, what we need to do, think and consider more seriously is really what the foreign ministry and the defense ministry, the official in the system say. And I can tell you today, again at the briefing, there was no mention of the standoff, and neither did Chinese media raise that issue. So that goes with the earlier perception that perhaps there is a cooling off in terms of rhetoric, but in terms of psychological warfare, the two will coexist, I think, for some time. And we're having a benchmark here. I think a lot of attention needs to be paid to the visit of the National Security Advisor on the 27th of this month, where he's going to talk to, as we know, to the people who matter in the system in Beijing. So perhaps there is a cooling off till that time. And maybe there was some understanding which did actually take place in Hamburg, where the meeting where President Xi and Prime Minister Modi did meet in the presence of the National Security Advisor. So I think we are probably heading towards 27, 28, that cooling off period, definitely till that time, it appears. And thereafter, what happens, the talks may get reflected on what will happen on the ground from there on.
Right, Atul, stay with us. We also have with us Air Vice Marshal, retired Air Vice Marshal Manmohan Bahadur, a distinguished fellow at the Center for Air Power Studies. Good evening, Vice Marshal Bahadur. My first question to you, how should India see this? Is it a provocation?
No, it's not a provocation. If they are trying to signal some intent by doing live firing exercise, then I feel it is, in my view, a little kiddish, because exercises are done by all the militaries world over, and by just doing an exercise, you don't send a message of intent. It is just trying, as I say, a PR stunt or PR exercise for their local public, and we have seen this enough. There are enough of these drills which are available on YouTube, done by the Chinese military as well as done by our military. So once they have done this, what worries me is that nothing happens in China without the green flag being given, signal being given by the hierarchy. So do they think that this will put us off, or do they think that this will affect our decision making and make us take some steps because of their aggressive drills that they have shown? I think that's a poor understanding of our leadership and a poor understanding of present day India. That's what worries me, because when a wrong notion is held about an adversary, then things may happen which should not happen.
Right, India, of course, emphasizing diplomacy. China continues with muscle flexing. Atul, help us decode the Mandarin here. We're getting mixed signals from Beijing. How does the press in China, which often carries the voice of the government there, how does it see this exercise?
Well, you see there are two websites. One is, of course, the Global Times, which is a very hawkish, nationalist kind of it's actually a tabloid, not really a newspaper like of the stature of, let's say, a People's Daily. It's usually used as a sounding board. Actually, if you talk to their correspondents, a lot of material can be written without a signal coming from the higher authorities. What is more serious is the edits which the Global Times carries, which is cleared right at the top. So, I think Indian media also carries Global Times as if it's the official voice. I have resisted from doing it unless it is an edit, because a lot of kite flying goes, which is also to judge the reaction from the other side. The other website, which is serious, of course, is the PLA website, and they do have this article published today. There is this in the media which has come out. There is also a lot of online media in China, which is out of blogs coming out of, let's say, accounts like the WeChat blog. And I have been following some of them. And it's very interesting what they think about the present situation, because there is one blogger who has just said yesterday or a couple of days ago that we should not go in for any military confrontation with India, especially in this Doklam area, because India has advantage. And then it goes on to some detail to talk about the Indian military strength and the mountain troops which we have, etc. And, you know, so I do not think, I'm coming back to AVM Bahadur's point, that the Chinese are underestimating us. So regarding these particular exercises, I do believe this is not so much to signal to us, but really to keep the domestic audiences sort of, you know, legitimacy that we are not backing off from what we have said earlier. So it's more of a credibility enhancing move towards the domestic population, which is also very cyber active, by the way. The China Weibo, which is the equivalent of Twitter, or you know, there's a lot of activity there. So there is a domestic public opinion to be placated, and I think it's part of that.
Vice Marshal Bahadur, how is the Chinese army poised in Tibet? What kind of operational challenges? Because they're conducting this here, and this shows, or they want to test their readiness. What do they face given the terrain? What kind of challenges?
They have a flattish terrain generally in Tibet, and the fact remains that because of the altitude, the high altitude of Tibet, it has certain restrictions, places restrictions on human endurance, human capability, which to an extent is overcome by acclimatization. But that's as far as the human beings go. But the high altitude takes a very heavy toll on machines, especially on air power, where the capability of aircraft comes down drastically. And this is the time, you know, July, August, the hottest months in those areas. We know it from Leh, operations in Leh. So similar thing exists in Tibet, except that it is even higher. So their aeroplanes are affected adversely. So are the other machines. So the fact is that they have a good network of roads. They can bring to bear a lot of firepower. But in the Sikkim area, in the Chumbi Valley area, we have the upper hand because of the way the hills are positioned, the way the terrain is. And the Indian Army and the Air Force has got all gaps covered. We exercise that, and a whole lot of opinion pieces have been written in the Indian press by the Indian Army officers, generals who have been in the area. I have written one piece for the Air Force too, which clearly states that we have various scenarios worked out, as every professional armed forces does, to cater for all eventualities.
Right.
Politically, I feel, as Atul brought out, it's all working up towards the meeting that's happening later. Yeah.
Right, we'll track that. Thanks very much. I'm completely out of time on this one. Atul and Aja, thank you too for joining us here on Gravitas. We're going to take a short break, and still ahead on the show, the latest on Pakistan politics and how Nawaz Sharif's fortunes may be tied to peace in the region.